That night, the stars seemed to vanish from the sky. Only darkness blanketed this forbidden beach, a place forgotten by time, ignored by those who knew what lay hidden beneath the whispering waves. No one dared to approach, especially after sunset. Those who tried never returned with the same story. Some never returned at all. The beach is known by many names, but the one most often heard is the Beach of Screams. Some say that each wave crashing against the rocks carries the cries of souls trapped there. For some reason, my friends and I felt drawn to this place, perhaps out of excessive curiosity, or perhaps because we felt invincible. But whatever the reason, we were unprepared for what awaited us. As night began to fall, we set out for the forbidden beach. The usual calm of the night was now filled with an unseen presence. Every step we took along the path to the beach felt heavy, as if invisible hands were pulling us back. When we reached the shore, the sound of the waves broke the silence. But the sound was not the usual one we were used to. There was something strange about it, a tone that carried deep sorrow, as if the sea itself was mourning something. Unconsciously, we stepped closer, drawn by a sound that seemed to come from the darkest depths of the heart. We stopped at the edge of the beach, gazing at the pitch-black sea. There was no moonlight, only the faint reflection of distant stars. The night wind blew gently, but its chill felt piercing, as if it carried the last breath of someone. We knew this place was more than just an ordinary beach. It was a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred. The next day, we returned to the beach, hoping to find something that could explain the strange feeling we had experienced the night before. But what we found was far more terrifying. Our footprints from the previous night had vanished without a trace, as if the wind had erased them. Yet at the far end of the beach, we saw something that made our blood run cold. There were footprints there, but not like those of an ordinary human. The prints were blurry, as if something heavy had dragged itself across the sand. Strangely, the footprints emerged from the water, leading to the rocky cliffs at the end of the beach before disappearing without a trace. Fear began to creep into our hearts, but none of us dared to speak it aloud. We tried to ignore the feeling and continued our search, but every step we took felt like we were being watched. It was as if unseen eyes were constantly observing us, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The next night, we couldn't sleep. There was something in the air that made us restless. The sound of the waves, which usually soothed us, had now turned into whispers we couldn't ignore. As we approached the water, the whispers became clearer. It wasn't the sound of wind or waves, but the voice of someone speaking in a language we didn't understand. The words sounded like a prayer, or perhaps a curse, bringing an increasingly thick coldness. One of us, Rudy, dared to lean closer to the water, hoping to hear more clearly. But in that instant, his face turned pale, and he backed away in fear. "We need to leave," he said, his voice trembling. "There's something in the water, something we shouldn't disturb." But we didn't listen. We were too curious to walk away. We wanted to know what was hidden behind the whispers. However, as we approached the water, the voice suddenly stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence. No one dared to speak, but in our hearts, we knew something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. The peak of of our fear occurred on the fourth night. The full moon shone brightly, casting a silver light over the beach. But the shadows on the beach seemed to move, as if they had a life of their own. They surrounded us, forming a circle that gradually tightened, forcing us back toward the sea. And in the center of those shadows, a figure appeared. His body was gaunt, with skin so pale it was almost transparent. His eyes were empty, showing no emotion, and his cracked lips moved slowly, as if trying to say something. But the sound that came out was not a human voice. It was deep and raspy, like the grinding of sand. We backed away in fear, but the figure kept approaching. In our panic, we tried to run, but the sand beneath our feet seemed to hold us back, as if invisible hands were pulling us back. When we finally reached the cliffs, the figure disappeared, leaving us gasping for breath, overcome by a deep sense of dread. After what we had experienced, we could no longer ignore the signs. We began to investigate the beach and the accident that had occurred there. From a local resident, we heard a story that had never been told outside the village. Years ago, a young man named Arif had died in a mysterious accident during a full moon night. They said he was running from something only he could see. After his death, strange things began to happen. People started hearing voices from the sea, seeing shadows moving along the shore, and feeling an unseen presence. The beach was soon abandoned, and the story of Arif became a frightening legend passed down from generation to generation. But there was more that they didn't know. Arif wasn't alone that night. Something dark and vengeful had been with him, trapping him between two worlds. And now, that something was coming for us because we had disturbed its peace. That night, we all had the same dream. We were on the beach, surrounded by shadows, with the dark sea threatening to swallow us whole. But in the dream, we weren't alone. Something was chasing us, something faster than the wind and colder than ice. We ran, but every step brought us closer to the darkness. When we awoke, we found our bodies wet with seawater and sand. Cold sweat trickled down our foreheads, and we looked at each other in fear. We knew that the dream was not just a dream. It was a warning, or perhaps a vision of what was to come. But the most terrifying thing was that we couldn't escape. Every night, the dream returned, becoming clearer, more real, until the line between dream and reality blurred. We knew that the only way to stop this nightmare was to confront the spirit. Carefully, we gathered flowers, candles, and objects we hoped would appease Arif's spirit. On a quiet night, we returned to the beach one last time, hoping to communicate with the spirit that had been haunting us. We lit the candles and placed the flowers at the water's edge, then began calling his name. The night wind suddenly stopped, and silence enveloped us. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, the sea began to move on its own, forming a small circle in front of us. From within that circle, Arif's figure emerged. His face was full of deep sadness and anger. He didn't speak, but his gaze said it all. He was trapped, unable to move on because of unresolved anger. But what he wanted was not forgiveness. He wanted us to do something only we could do. With Arif's spirit guiding us, we began to unravel the true mystery of the night he died. It turned out that he was not alone that night. Someone was with him, someone who shouldn't have been at the beach. Someone who brought death to Arif. And now, that spirit was seeking revenge, not just for himself, but to avenge his grudge against the living. We realized that not everything that happened that night was an accident. There was something darker, a failed ritual, and a spirit trapped between worlds. We were now part of that story, and the only way to stop this nightmare was to finish what had begun years ago. We prepared for our final night on the beach. With whatever tools we had, we tried to protect ourselves from whatever might come. But as night fell, we realized we were too late. Arif's spirit had risen, but he was not alone. From the sea, other shadows emerged, entities older and stronger than anything we had imagined. The battle between the living and the dead began on that beach. The waves roared with deafening noise, the wind held, and the shadows that had been stalking us now attacked. We had only one chance to survive, and that was to end the ritual that had started years ago. We had to find the missing object, the one that could free the spirits and end the curse. Amid the chaos, we finally found the object, a locket that Arif once owned. The locket had the power to stop the entity attacking us. With deep fear, we threw the locket into the sea, hoping it would end everything. But something unexpected happened. The sea suddenly calmed, and the shadows disappeared. Arif's spirit stood before us, smiling peacefully, and then vanished into the mist. But as we thought it was all over, the sea suddenly roared, and a giant wave swallowed the beach, pulling us into the darkness. We lost consciousness, waking up to find ourselves on the sand, alone and exhausted. The beach was silent, the sky was clear, and the stars began to appear one by one. We survived, but the experience had changed us forever. No one spoke about what had happened, but in our hearts, we knew that the nightmare was not truly over. We had merely closed one chapter in a story that would continue to haunt us for the rest of our lives. That was the story of the forbidden beach and the terror that lurked within. Some believe that the curse is now over, but those who know the truth know better. The beach remains, waiting for the next curious souls to come and challenge its dark secrets. Remember, not every story ends with peace, and some spirits never truly rest. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you dare, leave a comment below about the most terrifying place you've ever been. Who knows? Your story might be the next one we explore. Stay safe, and remember, some places are better left undisturbed.